If you had to think about something that creates life, what is that? Yes, it's water. Anywhere you find fresh water, you will find life. One of the most important infrastructures to a civilization or a country is its water system. In places where there's plenty of rain, there's usually no problems with water, but not everywhere has a ton of rainfall. There are a lot of dry places with a lot of population that always had water problems throughout history. Like when you look at the Sahara Desert that takes over the entire northern part of Africa, it only gets a few centimeters of rainfall per year, and you could say it's one of the driest areas in the whole world. And that's the reason a lot of civilizations didn't thrive over here, except for one, and that's Egypt. But they had an insane river, probably the most famous river in the world, the Nile. And this is the main reason why the Egyptian Empire was around for so long. It's interesting to know, until recently, they thought the Nile River was the longest river in history. But after the 1960s, when the Brazilians and the Americans started to measure the Amazon River, they realized that it's a tiny bit longer than the Nile River. So throughout human history, the Nile River has been the longest river known to man for a very long time. But let's get back to the Sahara. So throughout history, except Egypt, every form of civilization in the Saharan desert always had an issue with water, and they were always trying to figure out a way to get fresh water in different places. But unfortunately, they were always unsuccessful. Like for example, look at the country of Libya, one of the biggest countries in Africa, but they have one huge problem, and that's water. And Libya is known as one of the driest countries in the world. The people of Libya were always trying to figure out how to fix the water problem, but they couldn't even get to a point where they can start farming. Years passes and this issue is not resolved. Libya's population is growing and nothing is being done. In the year 1951, after years of being colonized by Italy, Libya finally gains its independence. Throughout history, the people of Libya were always having problems with one another, and most of the times it was because of water. But after 1951, 2 years after its independence in year 1953, they find something very valuable in the desert, and that's oil. While they were drilling for oil fields all around the country, they found something else. They found an underground reservoir that's holding a whole lot of fresh water, and the storing has started millions of years ago. You might not believe it, but under the Sahara Desert, they have found a water reservoir that has been underground, and it's one of the biggest. The size of this is more than 2.5 million square kilometers. Not only is it under Libya, but it's around the surrounding countries like Egypt, Sudan, and Chad. In the very ancient times, the Saharan Desert used to be a rainforest, kind of like the Amazon, and a lot of people believe that this underground reservoir was formed because of all those years as being a rainforest. The height of this reservoir is between 60 to 160 meters. In the 1950s, when they find this underground reservoir, the more they research on how to use it, they really can't figure it out, because the cost of pulling out all this water is more than buying water, so you can just purchase water rather than do this. In the year 1969, when Libya is one of the richest countries because of oil, there's a new leader in town, a man named Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi was a dictator, but he was a dictator that actually cared about his country, and he wanted to see his country thrive. One of the most important things he wanted to do and figure out was how to run this fresh water that's underground to every city in his country. Alongside other projects, Gaddafi wanted to figure out on how to run this water system. So he would always bring experts to figure out how this is possible and how much it is going to cost. And eventually, after years of research, they realized it's very much possible. So after many years, finally in the year 1983, Gaddafi said, "We are going to execute this project," and built the biggest man-made river in history. A river that's going to start from the bottom of the country and flow all the way to the north in the main cities, especially the capital in the northern western part. In the year 1984, after the budget was set by Gaddafi, they finally started the project. Hundreds of wells were dug out first in the city of Tazerbo and Serir, and then after that, all those wells were connected via these massive pipes to go up north. Basically, anywhere in the country that water was needed, it was going to be pumped there. It could have been farmlands or residential. After 7 years, the first part of the project was over. When we say the first part, this is something very serious, because basically from south to north of the country, these massive pipes were already run with the wells dug out. It was 1,600 kilometers worth of pipes that ran from the south to the north of the country. It was basically pumping 2.5 million cubic meters of water from the south to the north, and this is a massive number. So after this project was done, the second phase started. It was going to go from Brega all the way to Tripoli, the capital city of the country. After 5 years of hard work, the pipe was ran to the capital city, so in the year 1996. But Gaddafi believed that this is not enough water. We need more wells to confirm that we have enough water for all the people, especially when the population is going to grow. You could say this is an engineering marvel, and it's one of the biggest projects in history. And also, it is underappreciated. Just because it was a dictator working on it, it doesn't mean that it wasn't amazing. Nowadays, since we have a lot of droughts, especially in the Middle East and North Africa, if this waterway wasn't built during Gaddafi's time, Libya would struggle heavily, and people might have even been killed because of a lack of water. If you want to count every single kilometer of pipe that was ran in this country, it adds to 6,000 kilometers. That's like running a pipe with this size all the way from Paris to Moscow. That's how insane it is. From the other standpoint, Gaddafi had plans for the entire continent of Africa, and he wanted to help out the entire continent's economy. Just for a country in Africa to thrive this much and continue advancing, it seems like the Westerners, especially the Europeans, didn't like it. Of course, the main country that was against it was the country of France. Gaddafi would basically tell the other African nations that let's get together and create a formal currency for the entire continent, kind of like the euro. A currency that's backed by gold. When gold was mentioned and a currency in Africa, that's when the Westerners got a little worried, because that's when it gets a little serious. The French francs could be found in 14 countries in Africa, and all the profit for that currency goes back to France. So if those 14 countries no longer use this currency, France will take the biggest hit out of all of them. The French currency is the euro, but that's the European Union. The 14 countries using the francs makes France a whole lot of money. So the biggest enemy to Gaddafi was the French government. But let's get back to the biggest man-made river in the world. During Gaddafi's time, Libya was the richest country in Africa. And without foreign loans, Gaddafi pulled off this project, and it cost $27 billion. The only country that helped him out was South Korea, because he didn't want any Western country to help him out. The Arabian countries in the Persian Gulf spent a whole lot of money to bring fresh waters for their country, but they have desalination plants which pumps the salt back into the ocean, causing a lot of harm to the environment. And also, it costs a whole lot of money to clean that salt water and make it fresh. A huge difference between the system Gaddafi had versus the Persian Gulf Arab countries is that it costs less money because you pay for the project once and just maintain it. But every day the desalination plants cost a whole lot of money to operate. That's why that $27 billion up front was a lot more valuable, and it doesn't hurt the environment as much. This system brought so much fresh water to Libya that a farmer that uses 1,000 liters of water will only pay 62 cents for it, an extremely low amount for a country in the Sahara. You might say this is an underground reservoir. Eventually, it's going to run out of water. But we said this is the biggest underground reservoir in the whole world. And yes, it will eventually run out, but in 4,600 years. The only way for this usage to go down is for the other countries that share this reservoir to start spending money and running pipes. Countries like Egypt, Sudan, and Chad. This is an amazing engineering marvel, and it's still continuing to expand to this day. Some even call it the 8th wonder of the world. Let us know what you think about this project.